Now, Donald Trump has been very busy tearing up the international liberal consensus, and he appears to have upset a former British politician. My next guest has revealed the truth behind this development. Check this out.
Here is Rory Stewart explaining his connection to USAID.
Stopped. Doesn't matter. You have a contract. So, Turquoise Mountain, which my wife Shoshana runs, has a contract. Had another $1 million to go. Money just stops.
The Turquoise Mountain Foundation exists to teach Afghani peasants about degenerate modern art.
So this is in some ways often called the first piece of conceptual art. Does anyone know what it is?
That's where your money's gone. Your money is going, or was going until Trump got hold of it, to pay off the wives of British politicians turned Yale professors to teach Afghanis who probably have more important things on their mind about how perverse Western anti-artists decided to pretend that urinals and toilets were, Caravaggio paintings in the early 20th century.
What a world. I'm joined now by Michael Knowles, host of The Michael Knowles Show at the Daily Wire. Michael, I must have watched your video about 20 times today. I think you've done us some national service by taking down Rory Stewart in such beautiful fashion. There is a serious point behind this, though, isn't there, which is where on earth has this money been going?
I think I might be the only person in politics or media who was not on the take from USAID. It is amazing what President Trump and Elon Musk and the Doge team have uncovered. I think probably Afghan citizens will do just fine without workshops on Marcel Duchamp. I don't think that American taxpayers want to be funding this sort of thing. What's so shocking about the USAID discoveries is not that the U.S. is wielding soft influence around the world. Of course, we do that. We're the global hegemon, perfectly rational for a nation to spread its interests around the world. The problem is what these interests are. In what way does paying off Rory Stewart's wife to give lectures on modern art to Afghan citizens, in what way does that advance the U.S. national interest or the broader Western interest? Or anyone's interests, really, other than these liberal politicians who have been on the take from USAID for many years. Totally ridiculous, and I don't think you're even seeing many people on the left side of the aisle defending these things, because 90% of the American voting public would say this is a misuse of money. Well, in case you're not aware, Rory Stewart's not having a great year, having unsuccessfully also predicted that Kamala Harris would enjoy a sweeping victory at the US presidential election and basically been wrong on everything else over the last 5 years. But let's just zoom into Trump too, if we could, because we've got your unique insight on the show. Now, we're seeing, as we're talking, our own Prime Minister Keir Starmer meeting with Zelensky over Ukraine. Obviously, Trump is taking a very clear line, essentially closing Europe out of the negotiations, and certainly not involving Keir Starmer. I mean, what's your view as to how this negotiation with Russia proceeds and what it's telling us about Trump's broader philosophy here when it comes to ending the war in Ukraine? Well, Mr. Starmer has made the claim that Vladimir Zelensky is the democratically elected leader of Ukraine. I guess that has been true. I'm not sure when we're going to get another election in Ukraine. There was supposed to be one last spring. That did not happen. You might say, okay, we can suspend elections, we can institute martial law during times of war. But for how long? What is the end of this war? President Trump has been accused of bragging or of exaggerating when he says that the war would not have begun on his watch. I think he is absolutely correct about that. There is one presidential administration in the past 20 years on whose watch Vladimir Putin has not further invaded another country. Wasn't George Bush, wasn't Barack Obama, wasn't Joe Biden. It was Donald Trump. And then Trump leaves office, Biden comes in, you get this invasion of Ukraine, and the whole war has been mishandled. So I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the end here? Thus far, the grand strategy of the liberals on both sides of the Atlantic has been to keep Ukraine as a meat grinder, try to kill as many Russian soldiers as possible, and sacrifice the next generation of Ukrainians to do it. okay, I understand the grand strategy. It's a little ghastly and gruesome, but I understand it well enough. But at what point are we going to say this needs to end? Because as long as this goes on, there is the risk of an escalation into a greater regional war or into a global conflict. Let's not forget, we are dealing with nuclear powers here. So I'm pleased to see that the liberals on the other side of the Atlantic and the liberals in our own country have basically left the picture here. The adults are back in charge, and I trust that there will be a serious conclusion. But one big warning to Zelensky. If Zelensky thinks that he's going to get himself a good deal by publicly attacking President Donald Trump, he's got another thing coming, and he should be voted out of office just for that political incompetence alone.
Yeah, Michael, the other big intervention that we've had here in Europe was obviously J.D. Vance coming over and dropping some very big truth bombs on Europe's elite when it comes to things like free speech, mass immigration, defense spending. Just tell us, if you can, what is the view within the White House when it comes to Europe, above and beyond Ukraine? So not only about the war, but I seem to be picking up a sort of sense of exasperation within Team Trump, a kind of sense of disillusionment, if you like, about Europe's contribution, or some might say lack of contribution, to actually, making Western civilization great again.
Sure. Ronald Reagan flew to Germany and he gave his famous tear down this wall speech. I think what J.D. Vance gave in Munich was the tear down this firewall speech. He called out the Germans and the Europeans more broadly directly. He said, you people are afraid of your own citizens. You set up firewalls to stop your citizens from having a say over basic national questions. You arrest citizens, not just in continental Europe, but even in the UK, for praying in their own heads, in their own minds, silently, outside of abortion mills. You launch midnight raids in Germany on citizens for posting things that you don't like politically on Facebook. And what J.D. Vance said is, we're not going to underrate that anymore, okay? The United States is happy to be the leader of the free world, to provide the great lion's share of security for the West, but we are not going to subsidize the liberal European leaders undermining their own citizens and trampling on their legitimate rights. And I think that you've seen in your own country with the wonderful Brexit vote, you've seen throughout continental Europe in the election of Giorgia Meloni, or in the election of Viktor Orban, or many other right-wing leaders, you've seen this push by ordinary Europeans and Brits to say, this liberal status quo is not working for us. And in comes President Trump. We've had our own problems in that regard. He finally comes into power again with the majority of Americans behind him. And he says, you know what? We have a new sheriff in town, not just in Washington, but throughout the West broadly. And when the liberal elites at the Munich Security Conference were crying at the end of that conference, I think they had good reason to cry, because their corrupt political order is coming to an end.
Yeah, Michael, if I can, we've seen it's been sort of shock and awe in the early weeks of Trump too. We've seen the USAID debate, the Doge, the government efficiency debate. We've seen action on the border. We've seen action on Ukraine. We've seen this talk about building the Riviera in the Middle East. I'm hesitant to ask this question, but what on earth is coming next?
It has felt as though these first 3 weeks have been 3 years. President Trump warned we would get tired of winning. I'm not tired of winning. I am a little bit tired, though. It is quite dizzying. And I think what you're going to see now is a real exercise of U.S. power. It's not my observation originally. Walter Kern, I think, was the first person I saw point this out, that we talk about the peaceful transfer of power so often, but really, in recent years, it's felt less like a transfer of power than it has a changing of the shifts from, say, Bush to Clinton to Bush to Obama. It's all kind of the same thing, people who broadly agree. President Trump's election is a shift in power, and that means you're going to get a new direction, a restoration of a traditional direction when it comes to immigration, when it comes to tariffs and trade, when it comes to global governance. Even just today, the fact that the U.S. State Department has classified 6 to 8 foreign drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations means that the United States now has a whole host of resources available, up to and including the military, to take out these groups. What President Trump has shown us above all is You can have good government. It's actually not even all that complicated. You just need the will to do it. And our liberal elites who've been running our respective societies for the past couple of decades now have simply not wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I was struck by conservative writer Douglas Murray's comments this week in London. He said, well, if the last few decades will go down in history as the age of deconstruction, perhaps what is starting with Trump too is the age of reconstruction. Thank you, Michael Knowles, for joining us. Some fascinating insights from the US